Hi guys. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm so excited about Royals, and I don't know how it's going to be to stream. But I want to spend a little bit of time with it. And I was thinking that stuff would go faster tonight, and I would have like an hour that I could play it. But that would go really super late, and I think there's plenty to talk about in terms of shelter and if there's more stuff on Among the Sleep that you want to bring up. I'd be happy to field more questions there. So I think let's just leave Royals maybe for next time, because I am anxious to play it, but I want to give it its due. Okay, shelter questions. First, I just want to start off by saying this was an interesting game to take a break from. This is the first time on play-by-play that I've like taken a vacation from a game to play something else. And it was a little rough on re-entry, right? Getting back into shelter was a little hard for me. Like the game threw me into a situation where I don't know. It took me a little while to sort of get back into the same mindset that I had been in when we left, and I think the game. That was hard. Like I don't know that the game specifically punished me for that, but I don't know that it's a coincidence that that first section is where I lost, two of my little badgers. So that's just a data point. I actually feel like this is a game that has really harsh transitions from scene to scene. And I sort of went into each scene having no idea what to expect and what things were going to be different. The last one or two, like it felt like I recognized all of the elements, but especially that first one that I did tonight in the darkness was so different mechanically from what had come before, and I don't know. I don't know. I felt like there was kind of a rockiness. There was a lack of smoothness to all of the transitions, but especially there with me having taken a break. So I just think that's an interesting thing. So here's a question. You mentioned not feeling like a failure with Shelter. What do you think about games that require you to die or fail as part of the post-tutorial learning you must do to be successful? Rogue Legacy is a good example. I can't speak to Rogue Legacy. I don't know that game. I can check it out. I mean, I assume that it is something in Rogue's Legacy, that it's a roguelike of some sort. Legacy as a title I find interesting. I think of Risk Legacy, which has a pretty specific meaning, and I don't know if Rogue Legacy is the same kind of deal. Games that require you to die or fail. So I don't. I mean, I don't have a specific problem with that. I think that it needs to be a very sort of conscious part of the design and serve a larger purpose. I think that you need to understand why you're doing it and how you're doing it. Personally, a lot of the games that I like to play, I think are not served by that kind of a system, and so I typically play games that I don't want to die in, and I can usually like manage that. I play them on easy a lot of the time because dying isn't part of what I want to do. A lot of games treat dying as a failure case as a sort of method of administering challenge. And that is totally what some games are about. Other games use failure as a way of teaching, and I think that's what this question is addressing. To me specifically, this is super important. Because my focus in my you know day job life is educational games. And the way that educational games often work is, or at least when they're effective, the way that they work is by giving you a system that you can experiment with, and teaching you about that system through experimentation. The whole idea behind experimentation, rather than guided experience, is that you have to be able to fail, and the system needs to be built with the expectation that if you are truly experimenting, then there's not only a good chance, but actually probably an expectation that you will fail before you succeed. Now, it's possible. So Risk Legacy may be a game, or sorry, Risk Legacy is, it certainly is. Rogue Legacy may be a game where the state of the game changes when you die, such that things that weren't possible become possible. I'm guessing that is the implication behind this question, which again is fine as long as that serves a purpose and is a part of an understandable experience. The problem with death in a game as part of the experience is that it tends to be interruptive. So when I'm playing a game and I die, the story kind of breaks at that point. And I have to reload a save or go back to a previous checkpoint. And the things that happened since that last save get erased from the narrative from the emergent narrative of the game. Which is weird. Just cognitively, that's strange. And as gamers, we've trained ourselves to be very comfortable with that. But it's a fundamentally odd thing to sort of, tell a part of the narrative and then go back and erase it and retell it a different way. And so I tend to appreciate games that don't do that. I tend to appreciate games that, I'm trying to think of a good example. The Walking Dead does it a lot, but it doesn't do it 100%. There are ways that you can fail in that game, but there's a lot of things that you can do that, instead of causing you to fail, just feed forward into the game state later on. And so instead of losing the game because you screwed up some kind of a challenge or you made a bad choice, all you've done is change what's going to happen next. Games that do that, I think, are super interesting because they don't have that sense of broken narrative. And then there are games that sort of try to get around it other ways. I always think about the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, which, if you have not played that game, it's a classic. But when you die in that game, the whole game is sort of framed as a story that is being told. And so when you die, it fades to the game over screen, and the prince who's narrating says, no, wait, that's not how it happened. Let me try again. And then you reload the previous checkpoint. Which is still, it's just as interruptive, but it's trying to sort of lampshade it. It's trying to give you a narrative reason within the context of the game for why it's interruptive. So yeah, I don't know how to tie that back to Shelter, except that I guess as an educational game, Shelter is teaching me systems. Some of those systems it was able to teach me very well, just procedurally, just sort of through guidance. Like the bird, I understood how that system worked well enough to use it, and I used it well enough to gain further understanding by using it correctly. There were other systems that I didn't understand, like I didn't understand the darkness. That was not tutorialized to me in a way that I remember. Like I was not guided through an understanding of that system. So the expectation that I have as a game designer then is that the player is going to fail once or twice before they really come to an understanding of that system, which I think may be 100% what was intended, because the game kind of doesn't really want you to get to the end with all 5 badgers, because if you do, then you feel like, well, being a badger is easy, right? Like, what was that all about? If you lose any of your badgers, then you feel actually more accomplished for having saved some of them. So I'm pretty sure that the ideal play experience for the game, for like playing through the game, for experiencing the game, has you losing at least one of your badgers. And I would imagine that happens more frequently than not in that scene where I lost 2 of them. I think that other players probably were able to figure out the water better than I was, but there's so little tutorialization and the mechanic is so different around the darkness that I wouldn't be surprised if that's where it happens a lot of the time. Okay. Related to the earlier question, or related to this question, do you feel differently about how unforgiving Shelter is if you consider that the developers might have expected you to play through more than once? So, I mean, that's sure. No, not really. Like, it doesn't change my my feeling towards it. Well, okay, let me revise that. There's nothing about the game that says to me you are intended to play through this more than once. There's nothing cyclical about the game. There's nothing about the game that unlocks a deeper understanding, even to the extent that, like, Among the Sleep, I kind of want to play through Among the Sleep a second time because so much of that game didn't make sense to me except in retrospect. I kind of want to play Among the Sleep the same way that I want to watch The Sixth Sense immediately after I finish it, right? Like that, the revelation at the end colors the entire experience beforehand, and so you want to re-experience it with a new context. I don't get that from Shelter. Like, Shelter doesn't have that, doesn't do that narratively. I can certainly understand somebody who wants to play through Shelter a second time, but I think you're doing that then because you're motivated by the achievement of overcoming that challenge or performing at a high level. I mean, the game essentially grades you by how many badgers survive, and so asking yourself, can I do better? Can I perform better a second time than I did the first time? That's 100% a legitimate way to engage with a game. And most games expect that at least some of their players will engage with it that way. Shelter doesn't do anything specifically to encourage that. And so I don't know. I don't think that changes my understanding of what the designed experience is. Like I said before, I think the expectation is that a player playing through the first time is going to lose some badgers. And I don't know that I would call that unforgiving. I mean, maybe that is unforgiving. Maybe that's exactly what that means. But I think that's definitely part of like how the experience is designed. That's what it wants me to feel, especially at the end. And if that motivates me to try to play a second time and save all of the badgers, I'm going to have a very different experience then. And I'm, the ending is going to feel different. And I'm going to feel accomplished because I did something that I know is hard because I didn't do it the first time. but I'm not going to feel like differently about being a badger, right? To the extent that this is a game about feeling like a badger, I don't think that that's helped, that goal is supported in any way by an expectation that the player is going to play a second time. That's my thought on it, at least. Really good question. Were the Badger Kids individuals to me? Certainly at the end they were. I knew the two, and I knew the three that I had. Um, uh, I didn't name them except for a little jet lag, uh, but um, but I definitely thought of them as separate, if only because I had to track them separately for feeding to make sure that they were all fed. Um, I didn't have a strong sense that they had like different personalities. And I think that that's something that the game could have conceivably done to enhance my sense of them as individuals. But I think it would have taken a lot in terms of AI and additional systems and mechanics and time to actually convey that. And so I don't know. I mean, it certainly wasn't within the scope of the game that was made. And I don't know that it would have made sense. I don't know that a sense of the Badgers as individuals was actually that important to the experience that the game was trying to convey. I certainly felt loss every time their number decreased. And I think that's important. And maybe, I don't know, maybe if I had had more of them at the end and it was harder to feed them, my experience would have been different. I'd need to pay like even closer attention to who's who, who's eaten, who's not looking well. But I didn't really, towards the end it was easy to think of them as individual because there were only two of them. Yeah. Okay. Do you think the badger was a meaningful choice as an animal to play? I hear they're making a sequel. In fact, they have made a sequel. It's been released where you play a lynx. Do you think that will feel different? Like I said, the sequel has been released. My understanding is that it does feel quite different. That's what I would expect. I would expect it to feel very different. Lynx and badger are closer than I sort of expected. Especially given the ending of this game, I'm a little surprised that they didn't go in a bird of prey direction. But I think that would have been a much harder game to make. And maybe they'll get there eventually. I don't know. Lynx, I think, makes sense on the level that it's even cuter than a badger. It's even more relatable. These badgers were done adorably. But you say lynx and everybody pictures something cute. I think that's probably a part of it. I imagine that the Lynx game is quite a bit different though, because there's a lot of gathering. In addition, like there was a little bit of hunting and a lot of gathering in this game. I think that the Lynx game would be all hunting. And it might be, obviously the environments would be different. Your relationship to the environments would be different. Do lynxes have predators? They must, right? I can't imagine that you would make a shelter game about an apex predator. That doesn't make any sense to me. But maybe maybe the lynx cubs are more vulnerable. Anyway, I would expect that to be different. I think that the difference between the animals is important. This was Cage Tiger's question. Cage Tiger did her thesis project on a game in which different animals are portrayed through different control schemes. So I think this is a really pertinent question for you to be asking. And I think that, fundamentally this did feel like a Badger game, and a Lynx game would feel different. I don't know if there's a good reason behind why a Badger in the first place. Like, why make a game about a Badger specifically? Except that I think a Badger strikes a nice balance between it's a predator, but it is not exclusively a predator. It like also eats radishes, apparently, and it exists in sort of a number of different habitats, including some like underground stuff that's really interesting to model and be in. And that there's kind of a sense of, I think of an adult badger as vicious, as like really something strong and scary. Like I would not want to be in a room with one. But I kind of imagine, I don't know anything about badgers, but I kind of imagine like badger, little tiny baby badgers to be like almost more mouse-like, or like, I don't know, to just be much more vulnerable. I think that like the strength and fierceness that badgers get comes with adulthood in a way that I think of baby lynxes as cute, but also they have like claws and teeth, and I don't think a baby lynx could eat me, but it could like scratch me up pretty bad. So maybe the badger is just like trying to strike a balance there. Also, these badgers were adorable. Like the art style that they chose to go with, this sort of low poly, very simple textures, like low saturation colors. They were able to make badgers that were just like super, super cute. So maybe that factored into it too. How much did you feel like a badger here? Was that the aim of the game? And if so, was it successful? So yeah, kind of, I touched on this just a second ago, but I think both the game does a good job of making me feel like a badger, not in the same way that like Among the Sleep made me feel embodied as a 2-year-old. I didn't feel nearly as embodied in this game. But I did feel like I was inhabiting the world the way that a badger would. I was like seeing things, like I cared about things. My priorities were badger priorities. My sort of sense of threat was based on like being a badger. The way that I just like processed and existed in the environment, the way that I related to the systems that were modeled by the game, I felt like I was understanding what it is to be a badger. It was maybe being a badger on a more intellectual level than on an embodied level. But also, certainly in the first half of the game, I mean, my emotional connection, I feel like, was a little bit broken by the break that I took and the way that it threw me back into a level that like killed all of my babies. But also emotionally, I felt like emotionally, this game was going for sort of an intellectual and emotional connection to badgerness, whereas Among the Sleep was much more of this sort of physical embodied connection. And there's also sort of a rational maybe connection to a toddler, that you know that got explored, but that Fox Stash actually explores a little bit on the forum. But yeah, I would say that the game is pretty successful at doing what it does, and I think that what it's trying to do is give me a sense of being a badger. Is the game trying to simulate the life of a wild animal more, or trying to draw a parallel to human parenthood? And question mark, single parenthood. I mean, is it significant that we are a lone badger mama that does not have a badger partner? I mean, that raises fewer questions to me because they are badgers than it would if this was, a human family. Because I don't know what badger social structures are like, but I don't know that they mate for life, or that the male sticks around at all. Like, I don't know that, but I could totally buy that this is a common sort of thing. Um, this is an interesting question. I'm not sure that I think the game is really trying to do either one of these things. Um, I would not have. I would not have drawn a specific parallel to human parenthood, except in the sense that the game is making me relate to the characters and situation that it portrays. I may definitely feel empathic or empathetic, or whatever word is appropriate there, towards the badger parent trying to like take care of and keep track of and shelter the children. Um, and because I am human, then that becomes sort of something in a human experience. But I don't feel like the game was explicitly drawing parallels to human parents. Um, I also don't think that it was simulating. Simulate is a tough word. Yeah, okay, maybe I do think that's what it's doing. It's simulating the life of a wild animal. Simulation often gets associated with a level of fidelity that I don't think this game was going for at all. Right? I don't think that this was a game that was attempting to simulate faithfully the like the life or environment of a badger. It was very gamey. So I guess this is where I'm coming from. Is there is a categorization of or a division between game, simulation, and narrative. Um, GNS, I think, is how it's commonly abbreviated. It has some other names that I forget. And so when I hear the word simulation, I tend to think about GNS theory and this sort of like separation of gaminess, simulation, and narrative. And this was a game that was much more gamey than it was simulation. A simulation is very much about the mechanics of a situation and the sort of emergent properties of that situation. A simulation of being a badger would be much more about sort of how hunger, like how different kinds of foods work. Um, there would be more of a sense of things like um, injury or rest, or like I don't even know. There would probably be more. Uh, it would be a much more detailed AI for all of the different animals that are around. The the controls would need to be very different. In order for this to hit like a really simulationist kind of a note. Whereas it is abstracting a lot of that out, and it's much more experiential. Perfection Foxes, who asked the question, is apologizing for using the wrong lingo, which is absolutely not what you did. You used perfectly fine lingo. I'm just using it as a launching point to talk about something completely unrelated. So I would say that this is a very gamey game. It's very focused on abstracting out systems to create an experience, rather than simulating systems to try to emulate reality. That sort of semantic difference aside, I do think that this is in the comparison that was made in the question, whether this was about animals or drawing parallels like metaphor to human relationships. I think this was more about animals. I don't think that the game does a lot to make me feel like it's explicitly calling out parallels to human relationships. Okay, this might be the last question because it's the last question I see. But why did you immediately feel like the post-credit cutscene was mocking you? I thought it put your entire journey into a much bigger perspective. Think about the frog children. Think about the fox children. You might have taken their mothers. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And I actually, if I had played this game 2 years ago when it came out, I would have 100% with all of my heart believed that it was setting up a sequel where I would play Bird of Prey. Like that's what I thought that cutscene was doing. But it was still, it would have been one thing to see. I mean, I guess was the implication of that scene that there were baby birds off screen that we were hearing? Because I didn't 100% get that. That like this was a meal for somebody else's children. If that was clearer to me, if I had understood that better, then maybe I would have felt more satisfied with it. But honestly, just the like I feel like my story has ended, right? Like I've gloriously sacrificed myself for they show the baby birds on screen and I'm just blind. I honestly didn't see the baby birds. Maybe I was just so focused on my own avatar, maybe, that I didn't see the baby birds. That's funny. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that again. That's interesting. That's interesting. That maybe I was distracted by talking. Hmm. Um, I was very focused on like the narrative arc of the Badger, I think, because I was still a little bit like okay, so now that this is being explained to me, that there was a nest full of baby birds, and I guess there were 5 baby birds. I swear to God, guys, I did not see this. That is, I think, a very nice cinematic ending. I felt, and I think I would have. I say cinematic ending, but I think I would have felt the same way in a movie, in a like some kind of a narrative movie about a badger that ended this way. I would have felt the same way about sort of like I would have been very focused on the badger. I was okay. Here's what I would do differently. Here's my suggestion, and suggestion from playtesters is always to be taken with a grain of salt, because playtesters are really bad at coming up with actually good suggestions. But I think that cutscene should have opened with the bird, like focused on the nest of birds, with no mama bird and badger in sight, and then once I have gotten a sense that now this is a scene about birds, then bring the mama bird in carrying a badger carcass. Because the scene opened with the bird and the badger right in the middle, that was where my eyes were focused, and apparently focused exclusively. But I interpreted the scene as still being sort of about the badger, and so I interpreted it as being about the bird like carrying the badger off, and it felt superfluous. That's what it felt like. It felt like I had already completed the narrative arc of the mother sacrificing herself for her children. I've seen the children running off on their own. They seem like they're okay. I feel good about all of that. And now, for no reason, here is a scene in which my dead body is being flown across the sky. a correct interpretation of that scene feels much better to me. And so if the scene had been constructed a little bit differently, I think maybe I would have gotten that. But I totally missed it. And that's why I felt like it was like it was mocking me, because I didn't understand anything. Sparkletone in the chat is saying they went straight to the most foregrounded thing. I don't think you're wrong. In fact, I think that like most people must do that because that's how they constructed the scene. But it's a little bit ambiguous because there was also a thing at the center of the screen, and there was also a thing moving. Maybe the baby birds were also moving. I would imagine that they were, but I totally didn't see them. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy. I'm being called a narcissist, and that's probably correct. Okay, awesome. This was great. Let me just say, I loved Among the Sleep. I really liked Shelter, especially the first half, and the ending. I actually really, really liked the ending of Shelter. I thought that it was a little rocky in the middle. Like really rocky is the word that I would describe. Like it was up and down in weird ways. But I really liked the beginning, and I really liked the ending. And Among the Sleep didn't end on such a strong note, but it was such a great experience. And that was such a fun game to do, and it sort of created so many interesting conversations. So this was great. I feel really good about the last couple of days. And next time I think I'm gonna do Royals, and then because I really want to do Royals, and then maybe start on something that's a little bit longer, like a I don't know, 6 to 10 hour game that that we can dig into a little bit more. Although something narrative would be nice, because the narrative games seem to go really well, and we seem to get a lot out of them. So I'm gonna look around. I might post up a like a survey thing about what that game is actually going to be. But I think next week I'm just going to do Royals, and I think that it'll be easy to fill some time with that, because it's such a we can experiment with it. We can actually we can do some interesting things, I think, where the chat can suggest different strategies. If you haven't played Royals and you want to play before I play, check that out. It's a game by Asher Vollmer. It's on Itch.io. You should be able to find it, I think, if you're clever, as I know you all are. Yeah, apparently there's like a big secret ending to it that I am probably not going to find, but maybe you will. So, and then we can talk about different things that I missed. I am busy this weekend, so there's no play-by-play on Saturday. And I'm actually feeling like I've had stuff on Saturdays for the last few weeks, and so this has been Wednesdays only, and that schedule has actually kind of really worked for me. So I think for the foreseeable future, this is just going to be Wednesday nights play-by-play. And I think that's going to work out nicely. I want to do some things occasionally on Saturdays when I have time to organize them, where we can do, like I've talked in the past about doing like an RPG, running an RPG with chat, and I have no idea how that would work, but it's something I think would be really interesting that we could try. Or playtesting some games with Tabletop Simulator, or doing other sort of eventsy type things. So we might do things like that on Saturdays every once in a while. But we're gonna move to a schedule where play-by-play is just on Wednesdays. Thanks a ton, guys. It's been great playing games with you and chatting with you, and yeah, thanks so much for posting such great questions and such great discussion pieces up on the forum. That's been a lot of fun for me to follow along with. Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. Don't forget to tune in on Sunday to Sunday Game Club with Thanarod. That should be a lot of fun. He's doing something different this week. He's going to play Kingsfield, which is a game that I do not know, but he knows really well, and he wants to share with us. So I'm excited about that. And I'll see you next week, next Wednesday, or perhaps on Monday for Mostly Walking. Yeah, have a great night. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.